Next thing I know, my oldest colleague is Helen Ziller. In this democracy, in our South Africa, you can't have this level of absolute racism to say that someone can't enter a campus on the basis of their skin color. If you are addressing the issue of a lack of quality coaching, you are going to see more Siya Kolisis. You're going to see more Cheslin Colbys. In fact, I ran into him on a flight this morning.
Join us in supporting the Springboks when they take on the All Blacks at Ellis Park on the 31st of August 2024. We will be hosting exclusive hospitality at the Ellis Park Arena. Our hospitality includes pre-match analysis by international rugby players, lunch, drinks, Category A tickets inside the stadium so that you can enjoy the game right there. After the match, we're going to have live music, more food, more drinks, exclusive parking. What more could you want? If you want to join us and bring any size group, get more information below this video.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the State of the Nation podcast. I'm going to be your host for today. My name is Makoni Maja. We are giving Mike Sham the day off and doing a studio takeover with my guest. I'm sure it'll be a worthwhile podcast, so stay tuned. But first, for a little bit of housekeeping, make sure that you subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave us a comment in the comment section. I'm sure you've noticed that Mike tends to continue the discussion on there. And on our second point of housekeeping, are you going somewhere soon and will be needing a car as you do a little bit of sightseeing, visiting some family, or even conducting some good old-fashioned business? Might I urge you to consider using Pace Car Rental as your car rental company of choice. We have a discount code. It's SONA, SONA. So head on over to pacecarrental.co.za and use our discount code to not only support the podcast, but also support companies that support independent voices and independent media, such as this show. About my guest, he is one of the youngest members of parliament. He is the DASO federal leader, the Democratic Alliance Student Organization federal leader. He is also the member of parliament, and I believe he is designated in the Portfolio Committee for Sports and Arts and Culture. A very rambunctious, charismatic young man, what the kids might call Riz. He's got Riz by a lot. Welcome, my guest. His name is Liam Jacobs. Liam, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Mokone. I never thought that I'd be on such a an amazing channel and get told I've got Riz in abundance. I love that, and thank you for that. Thank you very much for that. I'm excited to have this conversation with you.
I have all the confidence that you'll prove me right in my characterization of you. So tell us, in your very own words, you went from graduating in an honors to being inducted on the honorable member stage, right? Tell us a bit about your job, both as the now MP in this portfolio for sports and arts and culture, as well as the DASO federal leader. What do those jobs entail?
So what's crazy about that is I actually like had a little premonition about what I could call it. It's going from honors to honorable in like the space of 2 weeks. It was an absolutely phenomenal happening, because it's a happening that doesn't happen all too often with where I'm from. I'm from Kimberley in the Northern Cape. I come from a community called Jemdene. It's right next to Khalishiwe, right next to Floors in Colville. And it's an area that is really damaged by all sorts of different types of drug abuse, by gangsterism, by crime. And, to have made it from there and to be here today at the age of 23 speaks volumes about the journey itself. And now I serve on the Portfolio Committee for Sports, Arts and Culture. Don't know if you know this, but I'm a professional wrestler as well. Okare John Cena. So, that's what I do as well. And I must say, I enjoy the Portfolio Committee a lot, because the job of the Portfolio Committee is to ensure that we hold the entities that the department has to account, and that we hold the department itself to account. So it's a lovely job. And I must say that I enjoy it tremendously. I really do.
Yeah, and then about your DASO federal leadership, I think you're also in the DA's council, right? So tell us a bit about what you do over there.
So with DASO, I was elected on October 1st, 2022. It was a very interesting campaign, a very difficult campaign, and I got elected. And I didn't actually, fully have cognizance of this while I was campaigning, that, when you lead the students' organization, you end up serving on the federal executive of the party and the federal council of the party. And, I finished the election, I won the election, and I was just like, okay, this is big, yes, but it's really big. Next thing I know, my oldest colleague is Helen Ziller. I'm a colleague with the likes of John Steenhuisen and Helen Ziller, and now I serve on that body, and I've been serving on that body since that time. So for the past 2 years, when it's come to crucial decisions, I'm on the body that decides on the coalitions that we get involved in and how we get involved in those coalitions. And I represent a young voice, a student's voice on those particular matters. And in my capacity as the federal leader of DASO, I've led a DASO that has aimed to reform NSFAS. And I'm going to tell you now that is well underway to make NSFAS broader and more accessible to more students. And also, one of the things that we did, and this is a long time coming, this is a very long time coming, it's a 6-year story between myself and this individual, Blade Nzimande. We ran a petition to reform NSFAS and fire Blade. Safe to say,
one of those is in the bag. Yeah.
He's not the Minister of Higher Education and Training anymore, is he? So that's some of the stuff that we've driven there. We've driven a drive to ensure that we scrap the accommodation cap that is, quite frankly, ridiculous. And we fought for students' rights across the board. I mean, there was a point where the EFF around the campus of the University of Pretoria was saying that no white students may enter, only black students may enter. And the regional chairperson of the EFF at the time and he's still the regional chairperson, said that. And I was like, this is despicable. You can't have this in 2023. In this democracy, in our South Africa, you can't have this level of absolute racism to say that someone can't enter a campus on the basis of their skin color. It's there, it's on video, and we laid a complaint with the Human Rights Commission about that.
Well done. So we'll get into a lot of that student politics and student issues a bit later on. I'm wondering, your involvement in the GNU negotiations, you alluded to that, being that you are a member of Federal. Give us a little bit of insight about some of your individual contributions to those negotiations. I mean, you've got the Blade Nzimande thing checked off your list. Any others that you are in a position to share about your specific contributions to the negotiations for the GNU?
Look, I'd love to respect the confidentiality of the body at large. And in that, of course, is the contributions that I have made in regards to the way in which we approached it. I think that's just to pay respect to the organization and the body itself. But I can tell you that, of course, that there was definitely a form of involvement in setting up various matters relative to the GNU. As we said, it's much like in coalition governments, the federal executive's mandate is to take responsibility for such critical decisions and how we endeavor into such critical decisions. So that is broadly the involvement. I wouldn't like to hammer on that too much, just to respect the confidentiality of the body itself. And we also have a federal council where it was deliberated at length and with great respect to the many contributions that were made. Because of course we are a democratic party. It's in the name. The first word is democratic.
Okay, let's chip away at something else, right? That you were vehemently opposed to the ANC pre the election. You were very vocal on your socials. I'm sure people can find all the videos that you made providing commentary about the corruption levels of the ANC, the ineffectiveness of the president. How have you been able to reconcile yourself with now being in government with the ANC through the GNU?
Look, it took a lot. It took a lot in my personal capacity. It took a lot to understand this because, you look at what the ANC has done in South Africa prior to the election, and you look at at everything that has happened in this country, the unemployment rate, the obscene levels of corruption, and so on. But there comes a time, I'm sure, in any country's history where it has to choose between life and death, where it has to choose between building a future for its country or breaking the future of a country. And the choice was quite obvious. It was either the ANC, Umkhonto weSizwe Party, and the EFF joined hands, and we would have lost our property rights. We would have lost our constitution. Pregnant teenagers would be sent to Robben Island. That's what the likes of MK proposed. Or it was the Democratic Alliance saying, listen, we have said what we have said previously, but it's time to be mature about politics. And you'll actually notice there was an interview I did with E. They were having podcasts, and they were doing a pre-election podcast with young people, and it was myself and Mash Not Potatoes on the podcast. I'm not sure if you've heard of him, but we were on the podcast, and I said that one of the key things that must define politics heading forward is consensus. We must achieve consensus in our politics, and that means that in as much as we have values, every party has values. What is important is the program of the day. What is it that we seek to ensure that we deliver to the citizens of the Republic of South Africa? And that is the type of soul searching that it requires. That is why a GNU exists, as opposed to what would have been the complete destruction of the Republic of South Africa under the MK, EFF, and ANC.
Let me ask you on that point about the dark triad, the so-called doomsday coalition that would have otherwise happened had it not been for the GNU, which is the ANC coalescing with the EFF and the MK. I haven't particularly found that argument to be persuasive. You know, that's been the DA's position, that the reason they went against their history of opposing the ANC to then going into coalition with the ANC has been to keep the dark triad away. I haven't necessarily found that persuasive, primarily because of the issue that you raise of consensus, right? That those parties, the EFF and the MK, represent certain needs and demands that do need to be represented, I would say, in one way or another, right? Instead of being isolated, instead of being shunned. So how do you achieve that consensus when the goal is simultaneously to keep those parties who come with constituencies that have concerns? How do you like reconcile those two, that their concerns should somewhat be ventilated and addressed while simultaneously isolating them?
Well, you have to look at a proportional representation system and what a proportional representation system seeks to achieve. There exists within our current political milieu, if I can use the word, there exists a range of parties, a lot of parties. Some would call them popcorn parties. I wouldn't like to call them popcorn parties. Popcorn disappears quite quickly. You know, when you're at the movies and you just eat and before the movie even starts, you're halfway through the popcorn. But anyways, what I really want to hammer on here is looking at the proportional representation system at large. And if you look at the makeup of the GNU as it stands, it accounts for 287 out of the 400 seats in Parliament. That is a substantial amount of people from across the Republic of South Africa, and their needs are being represented. And this does not deprive the likes of MK and the EFF from raising the needs of their constituents, whatever those needs may be, in Parliament. There are things that you can do. You can ask the minister. You can ask the minister of a relevant department any question as a member of Parliament. You can stand in Parliament and you can participate in debates. You can raise those needs. You have portfolio committees where you can stand there and where you can ventilate and articulate the needs of your constituency. I mean, I was in a portfolio committee yesterday, and the way in which it operates is that everybody is given a fair chance to speak and to have their inputs and concerns noted, and we achieve consensus. Despite not the whole Parliament governing together, there's consensus that tends to be achieved, because if you start stripping away at everything, it comes down to some basics that we can agree on. I mean, we can agree that education is definitely something that is required for a child. We can agree that water and electricity are fundamental rights. We can agree on all of these things. Medical care, access to medical care as a fundamental right. So I think when you consider it in that light, the needs that you speak of are not being put to the side. In fact, they are being prioritized with this government of national unity.
All right. From accountability or from consensus to accountability, by all due respect, Minister, let me ask you this. How does a lighty like you hold somebody like Gayton McKenzie, who's got this big, rambunctious presence about him? How do you hold somebody like that accountable?
So, unfortunately, I'm not a minister yet.
Oh, sorry, member of parliament.
I'm 23. The life is long, But how do I hold someone like that to account? Well, firstly, I'm a member of parliament. Ek is bang vir niks en niemand nie. I don't have a bone of fear in my body when it comes to holding someone to account. But as things stand right now, it is a matter of asking the crucial questions. I was sitting yesterday in a portfolio committee meeting, and we're talking about the various memorials that you find. And you have a memorial, for example, for the Battle of Isandlwana, which is very important, very important. But you don't have a proper memorial for the Battle of Salt River. Battle of Salt River, where the most decorated, and this man, if we could have a top two, that man would not be two of like some of the worst governors in history. He was up there with the worst of the worst. His name was Francisco de Almeida, right? And he came to the Cape, and he thought he was gonna, set up shop. He thought he was gonna steal cattle. He thought he was gonna do all those horrible things. And he was defeated by the Khoi. The Khoi defeated the most decorated general, governor, viceroy in the world at that time. But something like that isn't memorialized. And I asked him that question. I said, listen, you have to memorialize something like this. Because currently, the tree that memorializes a battle between the English and the Dutch, whereas there's that history from 1510 that ought to be memorialized. And you know what he said? He said it's an issue that's very close to his heart, and he will take it up. So what we find is that he is making a lot of, and I won't say promises, but he's seeking to deliver on a lot of things. And as a member of parliament in the Portfolio Committee for Sports, Arts and Culture, it's all well and good. But it is a matter of saying, listen, if you're not actually giving out these things that you say you're going to be doing or not delivering, we're going to hold you to account without fear. Excrookie. I don't tatazel.
What did Gayton say? Once Baizani or something. I guess that's very much descriptive of you.
Yes, let me walk you through what that word means. Baiza. It means hesitate, right? It means tatazel. Literally, it means tatazel. So I mean that attitude, even when it comes to him, I may be in the Democratic Alliance, he may be in the Patriotic Alliance, but when it comes to holding anybody accountable in that whole parliament, you can't buy any. You can't. You can't hesitate with your constitutional mandate.
Certainly looks like Gayton has met his match in you and that you will be holding his feet to the fire. One of the issues that he seems to be passionate about is the issue of racialization. So let's talk about that, racialization in sports. Do we need race quotas in sports? And you're in a great position to provide a little bit of insights about this, given that it is well within your portfolio. But would we have a black captain in our rugby national team? Would we have Siya Kolisi without race quotas? I know he himself has been outspoken against them, but what do you make of that?
When we look at the race quotas argument, I think it is an argument that tries to equalize outcomes. And that is unfair to many people, right? What we ought to be doing is equalizing the access. That is what we are supposed to be doing. Another crucial point that came up from yesterday's meeting. So when I talk about equalizing access, what I'm actually saying is you must ensure that there are quality facilities throughout the country, whether it be a rural area, an urban area, whether it be Keimus in the Northern Cape, whether it be here in Johannesburg, whether it be Cape Town, whether it be Eldorado Park, Messina, whether it be in Wentworth, whether it be in Port Elizabeth, East London, anywhere, there has to be quality sporting facilities. That is the first step. The second step is you must actually ensure that there's holistic development taking place within a particular sport. So when we talk about something like race quotas, we can't talk about ensuring that X amount of people from X race come into a squad. What we must be ensuring is make sure that everybody in South Africa has the ability to exercise their talents and their dreams. If we are doing that, then you won't need a race quota. You'll find that in our sports, you'll reach a stage post-development, and there's many economic studies that actually account for this. You'll reach a stage post-development where naturally it will happen. And I'm not saying I'm saying that we must build the facilities and hope for the best. I'm saying this requires a very, very strongly scrutinized approach, and it requires strong implementation by the Department of Sports, Arts and Culture to realize this. That's the only way.
So that would be the Department of Arts and Culture working with the Department of Basic Education, which is now a minister from your very party, working to ensure that equality of opportunity, right, is accelerated, but also that the access is more widespread than it currently is, which I think it is narrow, and it favors schools that are not even government schools, right? You see a lot of the resources going towards or being attracted towards private schools.
So that's a very interesting thing that you raised there. I was actually asked this. So Bayanda Walaza, he's 18 years old, right? And big ups to Bayanda. When I was 18, I was struggling to pass physics. That man was passing world-class athletes. So, you know, when we received him, they raised the question and they said, you know, what should we do in light of Bayanda having to come all the way to Hazeldean and staying at a hostel to realize his dreams? I said, you got to build the facility closer. You got to make sure that the facility is closer to home. And this is going to require a cross-departmental approach because it can't be done in isolation. I mean, I used to play chess. When I was 12 years old up until 18, I played chess, and I'm a 4-time Northern Cape chess champion. Why? Because at the time, school sports was functioning quite well. So we need to bring back school sports. We need to ensure that school sports are taking place throughout our country. We need to make sure that, you know, that people are going for the winter games, or they have summer games, or they are just involved. You know why? And it's not isolation. It's not just saying we want to realize the best athletes. It's not just saying that. It is about the economics of time. It is about ensuring that this time that we have, when we look at something as crucial as time, we all have 24 hours in a day. How they are used is different. The crucial part about sports is this. It comes in and it takes time and puts it into a social activity as opposed to it being in an anti-social activity. That is where the saying, a child in sport is a child out of court, comes from. And when you look at a lot of people that are lost in the system, my goodness, I went to Northern Cape High School, right? Guess which province? So I went to Northern Cape High, and I saw some of the most talented rugby players, some of the quickest athletes. They attained such amazing results at the national level. They had honorary colors from the school because they finished top 3 in the country. But so many of them get lost in the system. I go on Facebook today, and I even want to cry thinking about it. I go on Facebook today, and out of all of them, I only see one in a professional rugby team. Out of all of them, I don't see anyone running athletics anymore. I don't see anybody participating in these crucial events anymore. I look at the amazing chess players that our school has produced. Stop playing chess. I look at the netball players. They don't play netball anymore. And what's worse is when you remove that, it takes away from the broader community as well. So this is why we need to bring back school sports, and we need to intensify it. This is why the department ought to deliver on its mandate of building a nation of winners and actually winning. Because I know South Africans love to win. I love winning. You love winning. If you don't love winning, then you are probably not a South African. It's about that, and that's what's important. We got to bring this back, and we got to ensure that we have more winners in our nation.
So what would your response be to people who make the case for schools such as the one that you went to, Northern Cape High School, I believe, that say that they were previously disadvantaged, and so naturally your national rugby team, or even the big teams that we have in South Africa, would be represented by mostly schools that benefited from apartheid, historically white schools, that even if you had the equality of opportunity where you upgrade those facilities and you enable that access to quality sporting facilities to keep the kid out of court, as you said, what do you say to people who make the case that without quotas, you will still not have representation for specifically schools like yourself, that you, like the one you went to, as you described, because they are so historically disadvantaged that there's no other way to catch them up to the schools that were benefiting during apartheid?
So many people think change is immediate. It's not immediate, because when it's immediate, it's violent. Have you noticed that in history, that when there's
coercive,
it's coercive, it is authoritarian,
totalitarian,
it is entirely totalitarian. That's if you want change in an instant, then that's inevitably what happens. But funnily enough, the school I went to was actually what was known as a former Model C school, and it is a school like that that's still. And this is why I say we need a cross-departmental approach, because if the Department of Social Development had stepped in, we'd maybe ensure that more people are kept out of antisocial activities. So when you ask that question about how can we not level the playing field, but ensure that, it's not business as usual, it comes back to what I'm saying. It comes back to national cohesion, but also community cohesion that sport has the ability to bring. Because if we are addressing the issue of a lack of sporting facilities, if we are addressing the issue of a lack of quality coaching, you are going to see more Siya Kolisis. You are going to see more Cheslin Colbys. In fact, I ran into him on a flight this morning. You are going to see more and more of these athletes of color emerge. And that is an inevitability. That is real transformation. Transformation that is often spoken about is transformation that takes place in an instant and is airy-fairy and is just in policy, but not actually enacted. Real transformation is empowering people, everybody, each and every person, and giving them equality of access, giving them all the ability to participate. Because remember what apartheid did. Apartheid took away from an individual's ability to access certain things. It took away, not even certain things, many things, if you are a person of color. And if you are to try and level the playing field, you must address the lack of access that apartheid has caused. And to do that, that is when we talk about empowering our athletes of tomorrow.
Very powerful words.
Thank you.
All right, let's talk about youth, since we've been speaking about schools and so forth. There's been a lot of excitement about youth representation in Parliament. I mean, you are certainly one of the younger ones, I think, the last bonds of our Parliament. I saw a statistic that said something like about 30 of our MPs are between the ages 25 and 35. That doesn't even account for you and the under 25s.
I'm under that.
You are well under that. So let's discuss this issue of representation. What's your position on it? I'm not very gung-ho on representation. When I think about the representation of women in parliaments, and there's been in South Africa certainly a higher degree of gender parity than other counterparts, even in developing countries. You have like a lot of women represented in parliament, but that hasn't necessarily translated into women's issues being addressed, or even women carrying meaningful portfolios with huge budgets, right? But I'm guessing the idea is that if the youth is represented, then youth issues are also similarly ventilated through parliament. Where do you land on that issue of representation?
So first things first, I took a sip of the water. And I feel like it is the perfect vehicle for a conversation like this. Hence the car rental pun there, or the car insurance pun as well. But look, regarding representation, particularly of young people, I want to take you through a little anecdote quickly. I recall, just sitting in Parliament. It was the day of the budget votes, and it was about a 10-hour sitting. And I looked around, and you got to know there's like two other people who are younger than me, right? And I looked around the room, and I was like, yeah, man, I'm the only one that knows the lyrics to Takalani Sesame here. So, I say that because this is what I'm actually saying through it. I'm saying we have different perspectives on issues. And it's not saying that now you have young people, that young people are going to represent young people views. because there's a false assumption in that. There's many young people in other political parties that tend to just carry on with business as usual. And it is also the same assumption with gender parity. You assume that a woman is going to drive women issues in your argument. That's the assumption that is inherent there. But the truth of the matter is that there's a system, there's a broader system at play here that could ensure that that is not happening. But what's important is the perspective. There's a perspective that the woman has that I probably don't have. There's a perspective that I have as a 23-year-old that, you know, my colleagues who are 50, who are 45, who are 60 don't have. There's a new way of looking at it, a fresh way of looking at it. And that's what actually comes through in the representation. It also comes through in the way that things are done. Because I see, and I don't know if this is a criticism or not, but there's a lot of young people in politics who, you know, carry on with the same things that previous generations of politics were doing. Now, I'm not saying tradition is bad. What I am saying is that we will lose our spice if we get lost in the sauce. I'm saying that we will lose ourselves and our authenticity if we carry on with everything that was going on before we got there. So what I'm actually saying, it's a plea to more young people who are in politics and want to get involved in politics. As rigid as it seems, and as, you know, as tough as it may seem to be yourself, you got to go out there and be yourself. You must be you, because nobody can be you like you. You were elected for a reason. You were elected for a purpose. You got to show up that purpose. You got to pop out and show up that purpose.
What are some of those youth perspectives that you and your fellow under 35s youth are bringing to Parliament? You spoke a little bit about reforming NSFAS. Unemployment is constantly on the rise in South Africa. If you look at the latest profiling by Stats SA of the youth, it shows that the labor absorption rate has been declining, particularly within the youth, since 2004. So has the labor participation rate, which means that the youth makes up a much smaller proportion of the labor force than it previously did, say, some 20 years ago. More of those youth issues, please do. Let's discuss those.
So, look, it's also about energy. I think that when you look at young people, we have a lot more energy in the room. And I think it's shown just with how I'm looking at you, for example. You know, if I was old, I'd be sitting like this and looking at you like this. No, I'm looking at you like this because there's energy, there's a zest for it, there's a need to go and really affect change. So when you look at the young person in politics and you look at what I mean with these fresh perspectives, it also is talking about the ability to utilize the internet to research effectively. For example, a perspective on libraries. What do you think about libraries? There's just books, you know, that there's a gymnastics course around, there's an area to play in. But as a young person, what I do is I immediately go on the internet and say, how are libraries being innovated in 2024? Because this was what we were discussing this yesterday. And I'm looking, and it's about bringing fresh perspectives from everywhere. And you find things like maker spaces, where in Finland, you've got lighties, like you said, you got lighties that are busy with 3D printing, that are busy with robotics, that are being taught all of these basic things. And I'm asking, why can't that be done for our young people? And it is also the fervent fire that comes with a young person to Parliament, because you come there and you want to say, no, but why are you doing it like this? We've got to ensure that this is done properly and appropriately. And it's that fire that I hope that a lot more young people don't lose, is that we keep that, because that's what makes us, you know, unique. So when you look at perspectives on things like youth unemployment and unemployment in general, I think it's firstly the energy that comes with to solve an issue like this, but it is also the fresh perspective on different outlets to solve unemployment. I mean, we assume employment is just, you know, you go to work, it's done, finish, full stop. But what about the creator economy? What about thousands of young people who have talent, who can literally take their phone out and, you know, just shoot a random TikTok and it goes viral and they're getting brand deals on brand deals on brand deals on business on business on business. I have a friend who's now in America, and I know for a fact that he was able to fund all of that because of the numerous amount of brand deals that he was getting. And now he's able to live out his dreams with what he studied for as well in America. And I think when we look at the creative economy, we look at something that, or the creator economy, we look at something that can change the lives of young people by utilizing what young people are also very good at, which is creating. I mean, you've got to know, if you are a young person, you got to know the following people. You got to know a failed SoundCloud artist, right? You got to know somebody who started a podcast and quit after 3 episodes. You got to know somebody that said, I'm going to be big on TikTok and only did 5 videos. You got to know all these people, right?
I know about one, but yeah.
One is
checks
enough.
Out,
one is
out.
enough. It checks out. It's valid, right? But the point of the matter is, we know all of these stories, but now we need to support these stories to ensure that we can actually get, the next generation of creators. But that's just a drop in the ocean of solving unemployment. There's so many more avenues apart from the traditional ones that we've always been looking at.
And what do you say to people who say that, well, the youth is also a big indicator of lack of experience, right? I don't know. I know you have a vast experience in student leadership. This may be your first 9 to 5 or even longer, because you were speaking about 10-hour meetings and 7-hour committee meetings. What's your response to people that argue that the youth is also not very inexperienced, certainly not experienced enough to hold members of government to account?
So I like this one. I like this one because it's a personal one. When you look at something like experience, there's an assumption that it's like you have to be a certain age to have assumed a certain wisdom, and some sagacity would have befell you at a certain age. Not the case. We learn by doing, and a prime example of this is actually here's a very good example. Prior to 1994, apart from the people who formed the government of national unity in 1994, who had governance experience?
All the white people.
Well, yes, the National Party guys, right? But among the ANC, who had experience, right? So the question then comes in and says, you can learn by doing, and we've got to open up these opportunities to learn by doing. And we also now have a very strong tool to assist us with AI. Now, I'm not saying, for the record, I'm not saying go use ChatGPT to write your university essay. What I am saying is, as a young person, if you want to find out more about something, if you want to figure out a good way to do something, you can use AI to do that. And that's just another fresh perspective from a young person. So when you talk about experience, I think that's a very weak argument, because quite frankly, we are also a generation that has consumed information at a much faster pace than any other generation. And the generation after Gen Z is consuming it even quicker. My sister knows how to operate an iPad at the age of 2. She knows how to use a phone. She knows what she wants to watch at the age of 5. Sorry, since 2, she is able to move around the phone. But 5, right? She's 5. And she knows how to do these things. Meaning, this is what I'm actually getting at. We consume information quickly and we eat it up quickly. How does that not then, move on into the workspace and the work environment? So that's what we must look at. We've got to acknowledge that this notion of experience that's locking a lot of graduates out of employment is something that needs to be addressed, and it needs to be criticized now.
Yeah, I'm not sure the example of the ANC's lack of experience provides much confidence, because we've been paying a hefty price for that lack of experience. But let's talk about, you alluded to friends of yours who've been doing very well on TikTok and have been scoring brand deals and doing lots of business there. That speaks to the issue of liberalism, right? Freeing markets, letting people be able to run their businesses as they should. Why does liberalism get such a bad rep among the youth, Liam? I'm sure you and I can agree that capitalism and free markets are how we can enable growth and get and end poverty, certainly among the youth, but also in South Africa at large. But liberalism is hated, at least on Twitter it appears, primarily by the youth. What's that all about?
Well, if Twitter was the electorate, the EFF would have 100% in parliament.
Here.
But they don't. And it's because Twitter doesn't actually reflect a lot of South Africans. I think that when we look at the political ideology of liberalism, I want you to look at South Africans in general. South Africans love the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa. They didn't, they would have voted MK and EFF. And the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa is a very liberal document. It's a document that speaks to freedom of speech and property rights. It speaks to the rule of law. It speaks to unity. It speaks to a national identity. And these various tenets, and even the laws that were made, resulting from or rather, let me say, the Bill of Rights itself is quite liberal. So when you say that young people don't like liberalism, I think that's a loud minority. That's what that is. It's a bunch of people who've taken up phones and suddenly read Karl Marx and think that they know how to spell bourgeoisie, right? I am 23. I've got honors in philosophy, politics, and economics. Bourgeoisie is quite a difficult word to spell, right? And I make that point to say that there's young people that think that because there's a different interpretation of the state, especially those on the left, they think there's a different interpretation of the state, that, the state is doing X, Y, and Z, that the world needs to change, right? But the truth is, young people across the world have been doing this for centuries, right? But those are the radical ones. I'm talking about those of us who want to live a decent life, who want to work a job, who want to raise a family, who want to or choose not to raise a family, who want to live out their dreams. That is the core of liberalism. And I'm yet to find 95% of young people disagreeing with the notion that you ought to live in an environment that gives you the ability to practice your dreams. And if liberalism gets such a bad rap or rep amongst the youth, I want you to look at the fact that you and I are sitting here. You've got these cameras, you've got these lights, all as a product of, the system that is here. I'm not saying it's perfect at all. There's still many that are excluded and systemically excluded from various opportunities. I think of thousands of people in the Northern Cape who don't have their voices heard. I think of thousands of those in the Karoo who don't have their voices heard. I think of the millions more everywhere else in South Africa that don't. So I'm not saying it's perfect, but I'm saying it's better than the alternative.
Yeah. I've heard Tuli Madonsela push back on that, the argument that the EFF would be in power by making the case that if you amalgamate all the vote share of the left-wing parties or the progressive caucus from your ANC to your EFF to your MKs, it shows that South Africa prefers those policies. But you're arguing otherwise. The youth want to be free from the boot of the government in their face, and they want to get on the way, like start their own businesses, develop the country without there being so many restrictions in their way through government bureaucracy.
I across the campaign for 2024, I had the pleasure of being across Gauteng, and wherever you go, you hear so many people say that they don't want 350, they want a job, because there's dignity in a job. And I think that it's not about the boot of government, but we might be tired of handouts, and we might wanting to determine our own futures on our own terms, because that is also the reason why the Regressive Caucus only has about 25% of the vote share or so in Parliament. That is why those aren't majority parties, because they don't represent a majority of South Africans and the views of South Africans. If you consider the election outcome, it shows that many South Africans would prefer constitutionalism, would prefer a society of builders and not a society of breakers.
Indeed. So speaking of liberalism, let's talk about liberalism in government. How is it represented? I've heard Helen Zille point to the statement of intent of the GNU, pointing to things like that appointments would be made based on merit, and that policies will be taken being guided by evidence, right? How else are we seeing liberalism being reflected in government? I think a lot of that the bad rep is also because of a misunderstanding of what liberalism actually stands for, right? So how are you, for example, representing liberalism through the portfolio committee in your individual capacity?
So I'll answer you on that first then. firstly, in my individual capacity, that is a fundamental tenet of a liberal democracy, is the ability of Parliament, the legislature, to hold the executive to account. That's not possible in any other type of government, because if you speak out against the executive, in some countries you die.
Has it been diluted now that Liberals are in government?
No, I think it's even stronger. I mean, we look at the fact that we are able to ask questions and we are able to seek accountability, speaks to the opposite of defenestration of Parliament. But I want to say this: how is liberalism, enacted in government? It is what I said. It is the equality of access. It is ensuring that people have access to stuff, that they are not hampered by various other externalities in their lived realities, such as high food prices, such as an electricity tariff that just keeps rising, such as high fuel prices. I mean, have you seen that the fuel price has been going down, 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 down? GNU. But the point I'm trying to make here is that in government, liberalism is enacted by ensuring that we have equality of access, and that's what drives the operation of any government where there is a form of liberalism inside of it. And it also speaks to cutting red tape and doing away with bad legislation that doesn't work for our businesses at this point in time.
Yeah. I like that you're connecting the dots there between markets strengthening as a result of the GNU and how that has resulted in the rand doing fairly well against the dollar, and that obviously translating into cheaper fuel prices. Yeah, so I think that's all the time we have for today. Liam, thank you for being a sport and for joining us on the State of the Nation podcast.
Did you say a sport because I'm in sports, arts and culture?
I did, because you're a wrestler. You're a very own John Cena, as you said.
Hey, they called me Mr. WrestleMania when I was running for SRC president.
Look at that. A WrestleMania wrestler, member of parliament, one of the young ones, and certainly giving us a lot of confidence in the talent that we're seeing reflected in parliament. Do join us on future episodes of the State of the Nation, and remember to leave a comment, like the video, and subscribe to the channel. But also remember to support Pace Car Rental and use our discount code to score yourself a discount. Thank you.